What's up, YouTube? This one will be about Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis musical influences. And so they grew up in Minneapolis, and obviously a strong nod to Prince because I mean that was pretty much a lot of what they did early on. But before that, and in between that, with going to school with him and other things, it was Seals and Cross, it was the Carpenters, it was America. A lot of pop rock. Obviously, Motown was a big influence. I remember Jimmy Jam talking about boasting about "I Want You Back" by Jackson Five. So obviously they had a nod to Holland, Doja Holland, and then later the Philadelphia sound with Gamble Huff, acknowledgement to Chicago, the band. There was a lot of pop hybrids, and if you listen to some of their productions, especially on their slow cuts, you could definitely hear more of the pop side. Once the heaviness on the left hand with the groove. Terry Lewis always talked about Parliament Funkadelic and the groove and the band, and of course, Sly and Family Stone. So it was pretty much an acknowledgement of the acts that were happening. But because they were in Minneapolis and everything, a lot of it was more pop radio because that's what they were geared toward. And some people don't understand that, there was a life before there was technology and everything. And if you didn't have the right satellite and the right dish, you weren't going to get a lot of play of what was happening, especially in the R&B world. So you had to hone your skills and how your rhythm and your cadence. And of course, people might send you records or tell you stuff. It really was a different day and time. People might not have believed it. I mean, you weren't removed from obviously like the Jackson Five and James Brown and Aretha Franklin, obviously like that. But however, there were acts that, unless of course you had a special transistor radio, you had a certain state, you weren't gonna get access to certain acts. That's a fact. So pretty much the segregation of radio, if it wasn't the big acts, you weren't gonna get it. But obviously with Jam and Lewis, they were in, Earth, Wind and Fire, and I'm sure the Commodores, and you could take all the funk, but it was mainly a lot of the pop acts, especially with the harmonious parts of the Carpenters and what Seals and Crofts did and what America did. It was those lush sounds, which if you incorporate that with the Philadelphia sounds of Gamble and Huff, then those things would embody with that. So harmony played a big part. There's different things that they've done, especially with their slow songs, that's real noticeable about. So um, it was a good interview and a reflection when they got inducted into the Songwriters Producers Hall of Fame and their impact and the reflections and what they've done. Because I've heard a lot of different harmonies and a lot of records and things that they, when you hear it. So it's a real good overall view of them. And I think that, they are two of the most important songwriters and producers. They probably, if I'm honest, I say in my top 10, but I got a few ahead of them. But I like definitely what they did in the 80s, early 90s, for me, the highlights with Jam and Lewis were when they worked the SOS band. That sonic boom was on point. That groove was on point. The New Edition records, obviously the Janet Jackson records, because that's the dud. That's what really that's what puts them in a league where you can put them high because those records with her were huge. I like the Sherelle records, all right. They were cool. Some of the stuff with Sounds of Blackness I like. So that to me, their heyday was their 80s thing. That was their heyday. And but I always like to hear them play. I like the technical aspects. I like the influences. I like to hear that. And that's the kind of thing. And of course, the way they do those knobs in the studio and the sonic boom, the heaviness, the chording, those are the things I like hearing about. Anyway, wash your hands, keep your mind clear, watch out for another, and share if you like. And please hit the subscribe and welcome thoughts and comments. And if you do like any of the content and you want to ask a question, feel free. Stay safe, stay blessed, stay woke, stay free. I'm out one time. Peace.